Hi everyone, this is Maciej here, and thanks for joining me this evening. So today we'll be looking at the subject of errors, and well, as the title of today's webinar suggests, we'll be looking at the human side of errors. So to err is human, the importance of error in language learning. And, well, as the title suggests, we'll focus on the importance of error in language learning. We'll not stigmatize errors. We'll be looking at them from different perspectives, and as Maciej has rightly pointed out, I will encourage you, or try to convince you that errors are actually quite important and quite useful. So here on the left side of the screen, we have a structure of today's presentation. So first we'll try to answer the question, what an error is. We'll try to define what it is. Then we're going to take a look at types of error. Then we'll try to answer the question, who makes errors? And then we'll move on to another question, why do we make mistakes? Then we'll move on to another question, should every mistake be corrected? And finally, we'll take a look at 10 typical mistakes that ESL students make. So without much further ado, let's move on to the first section of today's presentation. So we'll try to answer this question. We'll come up with a kind of definition. What is a language error? And well, the question is over to you. So I suggest using this question box to type in your suggestions. What do you think a language error is? How would you define what a language error is? You can just briefly, in a couple of words, type in your definition. But let's see what your suggestions are. A language error. What is it? Okay, I see some answers coming up already. For example, wrong spelling. Definitely, this is a language error. So wrong spelling is definitely a language error. Anything else? Wrong grammar. Absolutely. Some of you are suggesting wrong pronunciation, for example. Absolutely. All of your answers are correct. So here is a suggestion that I found somewhere, and I believe that this is one of the best suggestions, which is quite general, but at the same time quite useful. It's an unsuccessful bit of language. So it could be any type of error, which at the end of the day is, is unsuccessful in some way, basically. Okay. So now, since we have come up with a definition of what an error is and know it is an unsuccessful bit of language, it might be interesting to take a look at this. So if errors are failures, why are they important? And again, we'll move on here. So what do you think? What do you think about this? Why do you think errors are important? Before I reveal the three suggestions here, I would like to take a look at what you have to say about this. So what do you think? Why are errors important in language learning? Can you use the question box again to type in your suggestions? I see some answers coming up already. All right, some of you say that errors, okay, for example, errors are quite crucial in understanding the language, okay, so they show that we don't understand something correctly. Okay, that people don't know grammar in general, and this is both applicable to learners of the English language and those who use this as the native language. All right, so how about taking a look at those answers here? So first of all, errors are quite important because they indicate progress. So if you make a mistake, then the teacher actually sees what you have done successfully and what you are doing unsuccessfully. So the teacher can actually adjust the teaching program to you. So then, you kind of like focus on those areas which are more problematic for you. And then, at the same time, errors of the lack of them shows that you've managed to successfully learn a given issue. and they show how language is learned. So this is quite in line with the previous question, or with the previous answer actually. So it shows that that the progress is steady, that you are actually having problems with this, but you're not having problems with that. So appropriate measures can be taken to correct your progression when it comes to learning a given language. And finally, errors allow us to test hypotheses about language. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you learn a rule in a given language, then you might want to try and apply this rule in lots of different contexts to see if it works or if it's not working actually. So when you make a mistake, you have a chance to look at your learning or at your language ability from a very practical point of view. You testing things out, making mistakes, and then if they cause misunderstanding, you self-correct, and so on and so forth. So this is how it works. Okay, so now we know that errors are quite important when it comes to learning a language. They might be important from several different perspectives. So how about taking a look at two most important kinds of language error? Now, the first type of the language error is not such a big error really. It's called performance error. Now, you make such errors when you're tired or hurried. Now, what it means is that this type of error can be committed by both native speakers and language learners, because when it's late, when you're tired, when you actually not at your best, you are very likely to make such mistakes. Slips of the tongue, they are called as well. And more formally, they are referred to as local errors, so errors which don't cause a lot of problems, or they can be referred to as simple mistakes. Now, the second type, or the other type of error, because we have those two types of errors, is the so-called competence error, which means that you basically have learned something wrong. So such errors refer to your lack of knowledge of a given language area, basically, and they're quite they are more problematic because they might suggest that well, you have learned something the wrong way. Now you have to unlearn what you have learned, etc. Sometimes they might also cause more misunderstanding than those typical slips of the tongue, and that's why they are called global errors very often, which means that the scale is a bit larger than those local errors or performance errors. So now we know that those two most important types of error are the so-called performance error and competence error, which brings us smoothly to the subject of language learning errors, which which encompasses both categories. So when you learn a language, it is likely that you make performance errors and competence errors. However, when it comes to language learning errors, there are even more kinds of errors, and here they are. We have phonological errors, morphological errors, lexical errors, and syntactic errors. And the question is to you, what do you think this actually means? I mean, these words don't look very friendly: phonological, morphological, lexical, syntactic, etc. If you were to guess phonological errors, what are these errors about? What area of language do they concern? Again, use your chat box to type in your suggestions. Phonological, morphological, lexical, syntactic. All right, I see some of you are already typing in your answers. So pronunciation and intonation. Absolutely, these would be phonological errors. How about morphological errors? The word sounds kind of like it's taken from medicine, but in fact it's also applicable to language as well. So morphological errors. Okay, they are about words, definitely. Some of you are suggesting that these errors concern words, word choice, for example. Now we have lexical and syntactic. How to create words. This is about morphological errors, absolutely. So I will not keep you in suspense much longer. How about taking a look at my alternatives to this? So phonological errors are about pronunciation mostly. Morphological errors, this is about using wrong word forms. One of the mistakes that people make, for example, is when they talk about their jobs, rather than saying I am responsible for this and that, they sometimes say I am responsibility for this and that, which obviously is wrong, because we should not use a noun in this structure. Now, lexical errors are about choosing totally wrong words. So basically, the word you go for is totally out of place in a given context, and it doesn't make much sense. And finally, syntactic errors are about the wrong sentence structures. So when the sentence is messed up, you might want to say that this is a syntactic error. Okay, and how about taking a look at some examples of each type of these 4 errors? So the first type is pronunciation, and here we are, phonological error. So we have 3 wrong forms here on the left side, which is tree, sri, and free, instead of what. Now, I encourage you to use the question box again to type in your answer. What kind of word should actually be put here? What do these 3 wrong forms illustrate? I see a lot of answers coming up. That's right. That's right. So I will not again keep it secret for much longer, because I believe that the vast majority of you have already typed in the correct answer. It's obviously 3. So tree, sri, and free instead of 3. Now, how about trying to explain why we make this mistake? So instead of 3, we sometimes say tree, sri, or free. Now, why? Again, use your chat box to type in some suggestions. What might be the reason behind people, learners of the English language, making such a mistake? Okay, I see that the pronunciation, for example, is quite similar across those 4 words. We're not used to these sounds. We don't have such sounds in our language. Problems with hearing, for example, absolutely. I mean, sometimes people just hear a word wrong. Okay, anything else? I guess, all of your suggestions are really good suggestions. Okay, I see a lot of answers coming up, so I actually believe that your suggestions are all right, these that I have just read out. I have put some of these actually already here. So basically, one thing which might be problematic about this particular mistake, so instead of going for the sound th, which you make when you put the tongue between the teeth, you go for other sounds, because the sound is actually absent from Polish. So instead of producing the correct form, we go for forms which sound quite similar to our ears, obviously. Apart from that, it might be just difficult to learn and to produce this sound. If it's absent from your native language, then it is just difficult to learn the word, and it's even more difficult to produce this. And finally, when it comes to the Polish language, it's also associated with lisping. Lisping is seplenienie. So basically, this sound is present when people have problems with the correct pronunciation, and that's why very often this particular sound is avoided by Polish learners of the English language. So this was a look at phonological errors. Now, how about moving on to morphological errors? So we have advices, furnitures, and hers. And obviously, all 3 words are wrong. So what should be the correct forms of these words? I'm waiting for your suggestions here. So we're looking at advices, furnitures, and hers, and something's wrong with that. Okay, I see again lots of answers coming up. So without the S, that's right. Okay, so I see that a lot of you are actually coming up with good answers. So again, let's take a look at this. We have advice, furniture, and hair. And obviously, as you're rightly suggesting, these words, all of these words, can be plural in the Polish language, but not in the English language. So if you want to offer somebody, and I will use the wrong structure here, 2 advices, this is wrong. You can only offer 2 pieces of advice. And the same is applicable to furniture. So a single instance of furniture is a piece of furniture, or you can just call it by name, a chair, a chest of drawers, a wardrobe, etc. And finally, hers is, I mean, when you refer to her on people's heads, this is only, singular, so this doesn't have the plural form, so you would just say that somebody's hair is long, is short, is curly, etc. Okay, and I see that somebody's actually suggesting that you can say something like, there are two hairs on your blouse, for example, or there is a hair in my soup, or two hairs in my soup, for example. Absolutely. Then you are referring to kind of like single hairs, but when you're referring to a shock of hair on somebody's head, you go for the singular form because this is how you use this word. And again, the question is why? Why do we make such mistakes? Furnitures, advices, hers. What's the problem with these words? And again, use the question box to type in your suggestions. Absolutely. I see answers coming up already that in Polish they are plural. They're actually copying things from our native language, which in this case is Polish. Absolutely. So, well, these are countable in Polish. Advice, furniture, and hair is countable, and there is no problem with formulating plurals. And also, it might be just difficult to understand and memorize that, in a foreign language, well, some things are basically uncountable. I mean, after all, people should not have problems with counting furniture, well, it turns out that in some languages, such words are basically uncountable, and there is nothing to be done about this. Okay, moving on to lexical errors. So, on the left-hand side, again, we have wrong forms, camping, bankomat, and thanks from the mountain. So how about suggesting the correct forms here? What do you think these should be instead of the ones on the left? Okay, I see some answers coming up already. A lot of those answers coming up, in fact. Okay, so again, I will not keep it secret. Let's have a look at what we have here. So instead of camping, we have campsite, bankomat. Actually, such word does not really exist in the English language. We have cash machine or ATM or cash dispenser, as some of you have rightly suggested. Thanks from the mountain. Well, this doesn't make much sense, really, unless you're somewhere in the mountains and you want to thank somebody from a given mountain. It's just thanks in advance. Now, again, we'll take a look at the question why in a moment, but first we'll move on to another example of the lexical error. So this is one of my favorites, really. This sentence is wrong. How is it called in English? So again, I'm waiting for your suggestions. What is wrong with this sentence? Which word is out of place? How could it be corrected so that it sounds right? This one is a bit more tricky than the previous examples. Because I guess, to the Polish learners of the English language, this looks pretty okay. All right. Okay, so let's have a look at this. What is it called in English? So basically, if you want to ask about a word, about how to refer to a given thing, you don't ask how is it called in English, you ask what is it called in English. So this is pretty tricky because in English you use a totally different question word. This is one of those mistakes that, especially as I mentioned earlier, Polish learners of the English language make, because this sounds pretty okay, pretty natural, etc. But the fact is that in the English language, the question word that you use at the beginning of such a question is different. So what is it called in English? And again, let's take a look at the question why. Why do you think we make such lexical errors? Why do we say camping instead of campsite? Why sometimes some people might want to say something like bankomat, whereas such a word does not even exist in the English language, or thank others from the mountain. Again, I'm waiting for your suggestions in the question box. Absolutely, I see some answers coming up already. This is a direct translation from Polish. There are different word formation rules, absolutely. Because we think in Polish, this is a very interesting thing. Absolutely, and bankomat and camping look English enough. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at these words, camping and bankomat, I mean, they do look like, English words. But, well, the fact is that we might be slightly surprised if we say to somebody that we are actually looking for a bankomat and nobody will be able to point one. Okay, so here are my suggestions. So the problem is with direct translation from the Polish language on the one hand, which you have rightly suggested, and this is also one of coping techniques. So what does it mean? It means that when we don't know what words we should use, we actually come up with some words which we think might be right, as the case might be with bankomat. I mean, sounds English, might be okay, why not have a go at this word? So this could be a coping technique when we are running out of words, we don't know the actual word to refer to a given thing, and we kind of like come up with our own stuff. Okay, moving on to syntactic errors. So we have a sentence like this: I very like my job, which obviously is wrong. So how could we correct this sentence? And again, use the chat box to type in your suggestions. See, some of you are saying that, well, you don't like this type of mistake. Definitely. And I see a lot of you coming up with the correct answer. So again, I will not keep it secret for much longer. Let's have a look at it. I like my job very much. So basically, the first sentence is kind of like direct translation from the Polish language, and the English, the English structure looks different. I mean, you put very much at the end of the sentence rather than anywhere in the middle. Okay. Moving on to another sentence. His hair are short. This might look a bit familiar. We've already used the example of hair in a slightly different context. Absolutely. I see you coming up with the correct version instantly. Okay, so let's have a look at it. His hair is short. That's right. So here, the syntax is wrong because, well, you are all familiar with the subject-verb-object structure of the English language, and basically subject and verb have to agree. So if we have his hair as a subject of the sentence and this is singular, then obviously the verb should also be singular rather than plural here. Okay, so the question again is why? Why do we make syntactic errors? Okay, I see some suggestions coming up already. This is quite similar to several previous instances that we're looking at. That are different word order. Absolutely. We have different structures in the Polish language, different structures in English, and sometimes we just go for the wrong sentence structure, because we copy language chunks from Polish, for example. So, if we have a sentence like this in Polish language, then why not have a go and try the same structure in the English language? Sometimes it might work, sometimes it might not. And obviously, in the examples that we're looking at, this did not work. And this might also be associated with a relative difficulty of a foreign language, which basically means that, when you have different sentence structures in a language you're trying to learn, it might be quite difficult because you suddenly have to think in a slightly different way. Okay, so now that we have looked at different types of errors, we're going to take a look at two causes of errors. And the first cause of errors is the so-called interlingual error. Now again, the question is to you. What do you think this might mean? Interlingual error. This kind of connected to the examples we have been looking at. So how about guessing? What type of error might this be? Interlingual error. Might be a bit tricky, really. Interlingual. Absolutely. I see some of you are coming up with correct answers. So these errors actually are about interference between two languages. So if your native language is different from the language you are learning, then there might be interference between the two. You might want to copy some structures, etc. So those errors are mostly caused by differences between languages. Because, as I've already mentioned, we copy our native language and then we try to see whether or not it actually works with a different language. So these errors are caused by differences. Now, I guess that this one might be easier now. So intralingual errors. So in contrast to the previous type of errors, what are these then? And again, use your question box to type in your suggestions, please. Absolutely. See, the answers coming up almost instantly is because of the difficulty of a foreign language. It's within a single language. Absolutely. So again, I will not keep it secret for longer. The language learning is difficult, and those mistakes are within a single language. So it's not like, we have interference between two different languages, but within a single language system. Now, those intralingual errors can be further subdivided into several categories, and in fact, quite a lot of them, 8 to be more precise. So we have different types of intralingual errors. Now, what I would like you to do is to fill in those blank spaces with the missing letters. But what I would like you to do as well is to put all those missing letters next to one another. So if you type a single letter, don't press enter right afterwards. Put one letter and then the next letter and then the next letter, etc., just to come up with all the missing letters from these words. So I'm waiting for your suggestions. I mean, waiting for your answers, not so much suggestions. I see those answers coming up already. Fantastic. Okay, so how about taking a look at what letters are missing here? I see some of you have already come up with the correct answer. And, well, you don't even have to put commas after those letters. Just put them, one next to the other, and you'll see that the actual answer to this is, when you read the word downwards, the blue word downwards, it's chill out. Chill out. Okay, so I will tell you why chill out in a moment. But first, let's just take a look at the types of intralingual errors. Simplification, hypercorrection, overgeneralization, inadequate learning, fossilization, avoidance, faulty teaching, and false concepts hypothesized. Now, these are all types of intralingual errors. In the coming parts of the presentation, we'll take a look at some of them. I mean, there are quite a lot of these types, but some of these are more interesting than others. Now, why chill out? Because you just have to chill out and learn from your mistakes. I mean, there is no better way of learning a language than making mistakes, drawing your conclusions from making them, and avoiding such mistakes later in future. So chill out, learn from your mistakes, make mistakes, because they are all part of progress. And let's take a look at the first type of intralingual mistake, which is simplification. So we have a sentence here. I watch TV now. But obviously this sentence is wrong. So what should the sentence look like? I'm waiting for your suggestions in the chat box. Absolutely. I see a lot of you coming up with the correct answer. Okay, so how about taking a quick look at what we have here? I'm watching TV now. Now, this is a case of simplification. So basically, it works like this. When we when we already know several different structures in the foreign language, in this case in the English language, but we don't fully understand how to use them, we are not yet proficient enough to use them correctly, we go for simpler structures. So obviously in this case, the present simple tense is much easier to memorize and learn than present continuous tense. So we just go for present simple instead of present continuous because it is simpler and both tenses are present. So our false assumption might be that it will also work in the context of an ongoing activity when we're talking about a thing which is happening at the moment of speaking. Okay, so this is simplification. This is how it works. Now, overgeneralization. So we have a sentence here, and again, this sentence is wrong. I would like you to try and correct this sentence. And again, use the question box to type in your answers, and let's see what's wrong with this sentence. And remember, we're looking at overgeneralization. Okay. I see a lot of answers coming up already. Fantastic. That's right. So let's have a look at this. Obviously, this should be I see two mice. Now, why mice? Because mice is an irregular noun. It has an irregular plural form. Now, overgeneralization works like that. We learn a rule that, in this particular case, to form the plural noun, we should add the S ending, and then, we might want to universally apply the rule to every single noun that we come across. And obviously, there are some irregular nouns, and mouse and mice is one of those, so the correct form is totally different. I mean, it doesn't have the letter S at the end, so it just, I see two mice. Here's another example. I mean, it's quite similar to the previous one. This time it's about verbs. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that sentence? All right. I see a lot of answers coming up as well. All right, so let's have a look at this. It's I sold my car. That's right. Now, again, the thing is that when we overgeneralize a rule, we, for example, learn that to form the past simple tense or the past simple form of a verb, we just have to add the ed ending. And obviously, when we do this and we apply this rule to every single verb, we'll be surprised because there is a large group of irregular verbs whose forms are totally different. And this is, one of such cases. I sold my car. Okay, fossilization. And, well, just a quick explanation. Fossilization is a type of mistake which is so common that it kind of becomes imprinted into people's minds. Now, fossil is what you see in the background. It's kind of like, an imprint of an organism in a rock, for example. It's difficult to remove from that. So what should be the correct version of this sentence? It's I'm have a car, but obviously it's a wrong sentence. Okay, I see a lot of answers coming up instantly, like really I'm flooded by these answers and very good. Okay, so the correct version here is that I have a car. Now, why? One of the very first things people learn when they start looking at the English language is I'm a doctor, I'm sick, I'm tired, I'm happy, and so on and so forth. So this I'm becomes so common that it's universally applied in every other context when this I'm is really unnecessary and I would do the job. So this is something that's very common, especially with people who are only beginning to learn the English language, because this I'm keeps reappearing where it should not. Okay, so here's another type of mistake, avoidance. Let's take a look at these two sentences. This is book, book is mine. So what should be the correct versions of these two sentences? Remember, we're looking at avoidance. All right, I see a lot of answers coming up already. Fantastic. Okay, so again, I will not keep you in suspense for much longer. Here it is. This is our book. The book is mine. Now, as the name suggests, some mistakes are caused by avoiding a structure. For example, in this case, articles are totally left out. When learners believe that articles are quite difficult, then what they do, well, instead of just, inserting articles, well, they should be, let's remove them entirely. I mean, after all, the sentences are understandable, the articles are missing. So this is a type of mistake that's caused by avoiding a difficult language area. Okay, so how about taking a look at false hypothesis? So we have a sentence again which is wrong. It was happened yesterday. Instead of what? I mean, what should be the correct version of this sentence? It was happened yesterday. No. Okay, I see a lot of answers coming up again. Are you really quick, to type in those answers? That's right. So again, here we go. It happened yesterday. Now, how does it work in practice? When people learn that was is associated with the past tense, or will, for example, is associated with the future tense, or in other words, it's a future marker in the case of will, sometimes learners apply the rule to any instance of a past tense. So just like will indicates future, sometimes the false assumption is that was indicates past. So ultimately, was appears in each and every sentence which is about a past event, which obviously should not happen, because was is only necessary in a couple of cases. Here, this sentence, it happened yesterday, is perfectly fine without any was. Okay, so you might have noticed that sometimes the same errors might belong to different categories. Now the question is, I mean, is it easy to identify what type of error this is? Is it is it an instance of overgeneralization, or maybe it's an instance of avoidance, or maybe it's an instance of faulty teaching or something else? In fact, it's very difficult to identify, to pinpoint what type of language error this is. So we have a sentence like this: I watch TV now, which could have several explanations. For example, it could be interference from native language. If in the native language of a learner there is only single present tense, then it might be just the case that the person is going for the easier option and using just the single tense. Simplification as well. If you already know several present tenses and you find present simple easier than other present tenses, you might naturally want to go for the easier option. Inadequate learning, this might just suggest that you are yet to learn more about the differences between present tenses, and at the moment of making such a mistake, you don't know why this is actually wrong. Hypothesizing, you might actually want to test. Once you have learned the present simple tense, you might want to try using this in different contexts. And sometimes, sometimes you will be right, sometimes you will be wrong, but you're actually testing, how the tense works in practice. So, in fact, it's especially important and useful for learners of foreign languages to know that there are several different types of error, and when they make such an error, this could be caused by different things. So if for example, that you are just hypothesizing, you're testing a given structure in different contexts, it's not as serious a mistake as, for example, a mistake which is caused by inadequate learning, because you're kind of like testing things out. Or in the case of inadequate learning, you might realize that there are still some things which you need to learn about, and later on you will try to eliminate the mistake. So it's good to be kind of like conscious of what types of mistakes you might possibly make, and then take appropriate measures to get rid of those errors. At this point, you might be interested in the question of error correction, because sometimes it happens that that in the course of a lesson you made a mistake, but for example your teacher did not pay attention to the mistake you made. So there are several instances in which error correction is necessary, and when it is not necessary. So we'll just take a quick look at this area as well. So An error should be corrected when others can't understand you, which I believe is quite obvious. I mean, if people don't understand you, the teacher should intervene, correct the error, and tell you how to cope with this problematic bit of language. When errors happen too often, I mean, when an error is really coming up very often, then definitely, it stands out from all the other errors, and this is when teachers should actually say, listen, just, focus on this, try to avoid making this mistake, etc. Another instance is when many students make the same mistake. Now, this might suggest that, for example, something was explained inadequately. Students might not have understood a given subject area properly, etc. So this should be indicative of some problem basically existing. And this is when teachers might want to correct mistakes. Now, another point is quite important as well, when the error makes you sound like an idiot. I mean, nobody would like to sound like that. So basically, whenever a mistake you're making is embarrassing, it's good for the teacher to, again, intervene and say, well, listen, this is not right. You should not say something like that. One of real-life examples is it was basically a slip of the tongue, but it was a funny slip of the tongue. It was a class in presentations, and one of my students, instead of the word part, used the word fart. So the presentation consisted of 3 farts, and the word fart, spelled F-A-R-T, doesn't refer to anything quite nice when it comes to presentations. So I do encourage you to look this up in a dictionary. Now, the final instance when errors should be corrected is when it's within a teacher's pedagogical focus. So, for example, if a lesson is about irregular forms of verbs, and students make mistakes, for example, with articles or pronouns or whatever else, teachers might be unwilling to focus on correcting such mistakes because this might actually distract students from the actual point of the lesson. So then, the focus would be on, correcting the verb forms rather than anything else. So this might be, quite useful when it comes to understanding why sometimes when you make mistakes, teachers actually don't correct them. There is a reason behind everything. Okay, so this final part of today's presentation is pretty interesting, I believe, because we'll take a look at 10 most common mistakes that learners of foreign languages, of the English language in particular, make. So I hope you will enjoy this as well. So here we have the first mistake. I have visited Niagara Falls last weekend. What's wrong with that sentence? How would you correct this one to make it right? And again, I'm waiting for your answers to appear in the question box. All right, I see some answers coming up already. Fantastic. And all of these corrections are good corrections. So let's take a look. I visited Niagara Falls last weekend. Again, the thing is that, when you have a point in time, when you know when something happened, you go for past simple rather than present perfect. Plus, last weekend is a finished period of time. It has a beginning, it has an end. So, it's done. Present perfect is used when you don't know when something happened, you're not interested when it happened, or, for example, a period of time continues until now. So today, this week, this year, etc. I mean, these things continue until now. So here, I visited Niagara Falls last weekend. Okay, let's have a look at this. I must to call him now. What's wrong with that? All right, I see answers coming up already. Okay, good. All right, so now we're taking a look at what's wrong with this. There is one thing which is wrong here. It's this to right after must. Remember that with modal verbs, you don't use to afterwards. So I must call, you use the so-called bare infinitive. So infinitive, but without to. For example, it sometimes happens that once people learn this expression, this, I have to call him now, for example, this to is used universally with all the other modal verbs, which is wrong, basically. So I must call him now. Okay, let's have a look at this one. I look forward to meet you. This is pretty useful. I mean, especially in emails when you want to finish them in a nice way. You might want to put a sentence which is not exactly like that. What should be the correct version? Okay, again, I see a lot of answers coming up already. All right, let's have a look at the correct version. I look forward, but not to meet you, but to meeting you. Now, the thing is that this to is quite, distracting here, because you might be likely to think that this is the beginning of an infinitive, whereas it is not. It's part of the preceding phrasal verb, look forward to doing something. So, as such, look forward to, this is a phrasal verb consisting of 3 elements. It should be followed by an ing form. So I look forward to meeting you rather than meet you. Right, and there we go. Here's another mistake. Where I can find a post office. What's wrong with that? Absolutely. Okay, I see. Yeah, I see a lot of answers coming up, and all of these good answers. You have rightly noticed that this is a question, and as such, it should be a question rather than a statement. Where I can is obviously a statement. We need to flip these two verbs. These two words here. Where can I find a post office is the correct version. So not where I can, but where can I? Okay. How about this one? This is one of my favorites. It's one of those examples of interlingual errors, especially when it comes to Polish learners of the English language. We're discussing about this. What's wrong with this? I see answers coming up already. Absolutely. Okay, so here we go. We were discussing this. As I mentioned, this is one of the most typical interlingual mistakes because in the Polish language, the word discuss is followed by about, which is not the case in the English language. It's just you discuss something rather than discuss about something. Okay, here's another one. There's a lot of people here. How about this one? What would you correct in this sentence? I see good answers coming up already. Okay, so here we go. No, people is plural. So in fact, the correct version of this sentence is there are a lot of people here rather than there's a lot of people here, which is grammatically wrong. Okay, and let's move on to the next one. Again, this is one of my favorites because this is another case of interlingual mistake. So the interference from the Polish language. Absolutely. See a lot of answers coming up. Okay, so in fact there are two versions. I prefer the shorter one, which is my brother is 6. But some of you have rightly suggested that you can also say my brother is 6 years old. The shorter, the better. So my brother is 6 is perfectly fine. Okay, and here's another one. She said me that she liked the book. How about this one? What's wrong here? Absolutely. Again, I see a lot of answers coming up. Okay, so here we go. instead of said me, which is an incorrect form, she told me. Some of you have also suggested another form, she said to me, which is absolutely right. It's just that, she told me is, I would say, much more common and, again, the shorter, the better. So she told me that she liked the book, but obviously she said to me that she liked the book is fine as well. And here's another one. The sofa looks great with its new cover. What's wrong with that? Absolutely. It's a small mistake, but pretty visible here. So here we have the correct answer. You just have to remember that it apostrophe S is, an abbreviated version of it is. And here, in this particular case, what we want to use is the possessive form. So it's it, but without the apostrophe. So ITS, definitely. And, one of you have noticed that a lot of native speakers say something like that. Absolutely. I mean, sometimes, it's problematic because sometimes some people add apostrophe even after, even when they form plurals, which, again, is obviously incorrect. Okay. And one final example, this is the man which did this. So, what about this sentence? What is wrong here? Absolutely. Okay, so there we go. This is the man who did this rather than which. Which is not to be used with people, it's who that we should go for instead. So these are all these 10 most typical mistakes that people make when they learn the English language. And what I would like to leave you with are those quotes about mistakes which kind of like show the point of today's webinar. If you're not making mistakes, then you're not doing anything. Or the biggest mistake you could ever make is being too afraid to make one. Or finally, every mistake you make is progress. Remember, mistakes are stepping stones on the way to success, and without making mistakes, we would actually be standing still. So just keep that in mind, and don't be afraid of making mistakes. You might just want to test, your hypothesis about what you already know. You might want just to, check out how language works, etc. And mistakes are really important. They show progress, and they tell you that you're actually not standing still. Thank you so much, guys. Now it's over to Maciek. He has something to say to you as well. And if you have any questions, it's time now to type them in and answer 1 or 2 questions right after Maciek finishes. So, I'll be back in a moment.
Dziękuję bardzo, Maćku. Tak jak Maciek przed chwilą powiedział, teraz jest moment na pytania z Państwa strony. Prosimy oczywiście o zadawanie je w okienku czatu. W międzyczasie, w oczekiwaniu na Państwa pytania, chcielibyśmy Państwu zaprezentować taką dodatkową formę nauki poprzez nasz blog językowy. Autorem tego bloga jest Maciek Duszyński, który właśnie prowadzi dzisiejsze webinarium. W każdy wtorek i każdy czwartek pojawia się nowy wpis na blogu, który jest streszczeniem publikacji pojawiających się na łamach prestiżowych magazynów, bądź też jest streszczeniem bardzo interesującego przemówienia, na przykład na konferencjach TEDx. Każda taka lekcja zamieszczana na blogu zawiera opracowanie słownictwa, ćwiczeń, a także linki do materiałów audiowizualnych. O bardzo wysokiej jakości naszego bloga świadczy to, że dwukrotnie zajęliśmy 2. miejsce w konkursie Macmillana na najlepszy blog o języku angielskim. Był to 2012 rok, 2013. Natomiast w 2014 nie ukrywamy, że celujemy w zwycięstwo w tym konkursie, więc bardzo serdecznie zapraszamy na nasz blog.